evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of South Oxford District Council Planning Committee. I am Councillor David Brotherton, and I will be chairing this meeting. May I remind everyone that this is a meeting in public and not a public meeting. Only members of the public who are registered to speak are allowed to do so, and I'll call on them to speak during the appropriate agenda item. The meeting is being held in our offices in Abbey House, Abingdon. Committee members are here in person, but officers and speakers are able to join remotely. The meeting has been streamed live on the Council's YouTube channel for public viewing. This system allows councillors who are unable to attend in person to contribute to the meeting, but only councillors who are present in the room are allowed to vote. Some procedural matters. For speakers and members of the public who have logged in remotely, please ensure that your microphone is muted and your camera is off for the duration of the meeting until you are called to speak. The Planning Committee is a decision-making committee of the Council, and it is important that a set procedure is followed. All committee members will receive a full report on each application, either on paper or electronically, and it should be noted that committee members' officers may be using electronic devices for reference throughout the meeting. For each application, we'll first hear from the planning officer, followed by the parish or town council, and then objectors, supporters and local members. Each group will have 5 minutes to speak to the committee, after which members may ask questions of the speaker. The committee may then ask questions of clarification from the planning officer. The committee will then debate and vote on the application. Councillors who wish to ask a question or participate in the debate are asked to indicate this by alerting myself or officers by raising a hand. Voting will be by show of hands. Members, please raise your hand clearly and keep it raised to allow the count to take place. If it's unclear how members are voting through a show of hands, I will ask the clerk to undertake a roll call of those present and how they are voting. Few housekeeping announcements. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate the building by the nearest exit, which is in the corridor immediately to the right of this meeting room, and then go to Assembly Point 9 in the outside area beyond the fire exit. The Democratic Services Officer present will assist you. Can everyone please ensure that their mobile phone is switched to silent or switched off during the meeting? Members of the public who wish to leave the meeting after their application has been heard are welcome to do so via the front door in reception. When the meeting has finished, I will ask for confirmation that the live stream has ended. At that point, please leave the meeting and make your way out of the building, remembering to sign out as you leave. Right, that was agenda item number 1. So agenda item two is apologies for absence. I'll turn to Lucy.
Yes, Chair. We have apologies from councillors Ken Arlett, Catherine Keats-Rohan, Ali Gordon-Creed and Peter Dragonetti, and Councillor James Norman is substitution for Councillor Dragonetti.
Okay, thank you very much. Minutes of the previous meeting. To adopt and sign as a correct record the Planning Committee meeting minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of January 2025. Proposal. Thank you, Councillor Sadler. That's seconded. Councillor Robb, do we all agree? Thank you. Already signed, wasn't it? I've already signed it. Declaration of interest. To receive declarations of disclosable pecuniary interest, other registrable interests and non-registrable interests, or any conflicts of interest in respect of items on the agenda for this meeting. Councillor Robb.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've discussed this matter with the head of legal at the council. My son, who is 12, is due to start school at the Oratory School, which is the subject of the first application on our agenda this evening. So that is not, as the head of legal has advised me, not a disclosable pecuniary interest. And I have considered the matter, and I don't believe that I am predetermined on the matter, and I'm happy to participate in the debate and in voting as well.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Urgent business. To receive notification of any matters which the chair determines should be considered as urgent business.
Oh, basically, no urgent business.
There is no urgent business. Right, so agenda item 6 is public participation. As I said, we will hear the public participation whilst we're debating each application, and therefore I'll move to the planning applications for this evening. On agenda item 7, which is the Oratory School, the Oratory Drive Woodcut, and I'll call on the planning officer, who sat to my left, to make his presentation.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks planning permission for the construction of a new all-weather playing pitch and 4 paddle tennis courts at the Oratory School in Woodcote. This application is referred to Planning Committee this evening as the view of Woodcote Parish Council conflicts with the view of officers' recommendation. The all-weather playing pitch will be located on the site of the existing grass playing field. The all-weather playing pitch will be surrounded by a runoff and spectator area and will be enclosed with 4-stop fencing, which will be 5 meters high at the ends of the pitch and 3 meters high along the sides of the pitch. The 4 paddle tennis courts will be sited on unused grass to the west of the site within the school's existing sports centre and community sports hub. Each paddle tennis court will be supported by 4 5-meter high lighting columns. Each court will be enclosed by a combination of toughened glass, black mesh fencing, 4 meters at the ends and 3 meters high along the sides. Paddle tennis courts are proposed to meet the demand of one of the fastest growing sports in the country. These will be used by the school and the wider community. Also proposed are pedestrian and emergency vehicular access routes through the Oratory School premise in order to access the proposed pitches and courts. Currently, the grass playing pitch, in which, these are just images of example paddle courts if anyone's never seen one. Okay. Currently, the grass playing pitch is used for rugby in the winter and cricket in the summer. The proposed new pitch will enable the school to expand the frequency and number of sports that can be played on the site, but will be primarily used for hockey. The benefit of the school and the wider community attributed weight in considering the merits of this application. The principal issues of concern raised by the parish and locals relate to the use of lighting for the paddle tennis courts, a question mark over whether the facilities will be open to the community use, the impact on parking and any potential overspill onto nearby residential roads, and the scale and siting of the development within the Chilterns National Landscape and in relation to the Woodcote settlement. Landscape enhancements are proposed as part of the proposal. In respect of the paddle tennis courts, these will consist of additional planting at the school's rear access off Greenmore. The bushes surrounding the area of grass accommodating the paddle courts will also be grown to a minimum of 3 meters and maintained at this height. In total, it's proposed to plant 46 specimen trees, 135 linear meters of new mixed species native hedgerow, and large areas of wildflower meadow. Supplementary planting is also proposed around the all-weather pitch. Oxfordshire County Council raised no objection to the proposed development, citing that the site has sufficient parking provision and overspill parking areas to address the needs of the proposed facilities. These views have taken the worst-case scenario into account. In respect to the location of the proposed development, to the settlement boundary set out within the neighbourhood plan and the scale of the development within the Children's National Landscape, officers have addressed these matters in the report before you and do not intend to reiterate them in this speech. The proposed development would be subject to a condition which requires the school to draw up an acceptably worded community use agreement, which is a requirement for obtaining Sport England's support of this proposed development. One major amendment to the scheme involves the removal of all lighting for the all-weather pitches, which has addressed the concerns of the council's landscape officers. It is officers' opinion that the proposed development would not result in any adverse harm to important landscape features, ecological constraints, or the amenity of neighbours nearby. Through the use of conditions, the landscape impact of the proposed development would be appropriately mitigated against. The proposed development has not generated any objections from the council's relevant specialist officers. Whilst not included in the report before you, officers are satisfied that the proposed development is in accordance with the emerging joint local plan, the weight of which at this time can only be given limited weight. Your officers have, within the report before you, considered all the necessary material planning considerations and have concluded that the proposed development would adhere to the development plan and that, subject to the conditions set out in the appendix of the report, should be granted planning permission. In addition, a condition is recommended to control the use of the timings of use of the paddle tennis courts from 7 AM to 9:15 PM. Thank you. So these are some of the photos from the site, which should help you. Apologies, I usually have someone at home doing this, but I'm happened to do this to myself today, so I haven't been able to click while I'm going along. So there's the entrance from Greenmore Road, or probably just called Greenmore. Looking towards where the paddle tennis courts would be, the cursor is kind of where they will be. As you can see, Greenmore runs sort of alongside the access. You've got this sort of planting, and you've got an area of open land which will help provide a buffer between the nearby residents and the site. A little closer look at the site. So there's the existing hedging, which will be allowed to grow up to 3 meters and maintained at 3 meters to surround where the paddle tennis courts will be. Again, another image of that. There's exactly where the courts will be, and another image within it, just looking the other way, and another image. And these are photos of the existing playing field. As you can see, pillar grass, slightly undulating, but it'll have to be leveled out. Okay, and these just identify where the existing levels of parking are on the site. So the paddle tennis courts will be up here. And this is the existing current overspill, which is anticipated to absorb most of the parking, the visitors coming to use the paddle. And as the pitch is existing, there's already matches, etc. that happen. It's not anticipated that any additional parking is needed to accommodate any future instances of matches, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. We'll come back to you with questions, I'm sure, in a few moments. Right, I have one speaker registered, which is Matthew Fogg. Who's due to. Matthew, you have 5 minutes from when you first start speaking.
So thank you all for the opportunity to address the planning committee. Sport has always been a central part of our educational offering at the Oratory School, and the school has long had a reputation for success. 5 years ago, we decided we wanted to offer the same opportunities to girls that we have been providing to boys since 1859. The intention was to be a genuinely co-educational school, with girls having the same opportunities to flourish as boys. We've been delighted with the way that since 2020, Oratory girls have taken full advantage of the academic, spiritual, pastoral, social and sporting opportunities on offer. Our girls have won the County Hockey League for 4 years in succession, despite having to play every game away from home and to lose training time through the need to travel. Our intention for the all-weather pitch is to ensure that the girls can have the same access to facilities as the boys in terms of both fixtures and training. This would also allow them to play and to celebrate their achievements in front of their peers and families. The highly competitive nature of our marketplace has also meant that the lack of this facility is proving to be a significant challenge to both the recruitment and retention of girls. In addition, the all-weather pitch will also provide opportunities for games practice to continue when the grass pitches are waterlogged and out of use. Ideally, we would like to grow hockey as a co-ed sport within the school for both girls and boys. At the same time, our rackets programme has grown to become a major element of our co-educational provision. Many families no longer want the standard provision of rugby and cricket, and the rackets programme provides an important way they are able to represent the school whilst also building up their fitness and skill levels. Paddle tennis is perhaps one of the most accessible of racket sports and will provide an important element of our sport for all approach. Public access to and benefit from our facilities has been a key aspect for the school throughout my 7 years at the Oratory. Many local groups have access to our pool for swimming lessons. Membership of the sports centre and golf course provide use of the facilities to the local area. Members of the public are able to make use of our grounds for walks, and local football teams are regularly able to make use of our pitches for matches. As part of our planning for the all-weather pitch and paddle courts, we have given detailed consideration to when use will be needed by the school and when both facilities will be available for public booking and use. Our own experience of trying to book external pitches has shown what a shortage there is of this sort of facility in the local area, and public use of our pitch should help to alleviate this. I hope that the history of the public use of our facilities and the planning that has gone into these projects will demonstrate the commitment of the school to continuing to make our facilities available. We recognise that there are cars parked on Greenmoor, but we have taken steps to ensure that these are not linked to any use of the school site. We have ample car parking on site and benefit from the fact that the hours of public use for the all-weather pitch and paddle will often happen outside of the school's regular operation, therefore assuring us that ample parking will be available. We also have regular evidence of the sports centre staff ensuring that visitors are parked correctly and directing them to the additional parking that is available across the site. We are happy to update our site signage to ensure that any traffic using these new facilities is clearly directed to appropriate parking. Thank you for your consideration. I recommend this application to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Paul. Committee, any questions? Councillor Donald.
Just brief one, hopefully. The current pictures that you use, have you seen a deterioration over the last few years because of climate change, and so they're more waterlogged and less playable?
No, if anything, the work that our grounds team have been able to do has improved the utility of the pitches across the site. Nevertheless, in Oxfordshire in January and February, that tends to be the time of the year when, just by the normal operation of the weather, things get a bit muddy. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Topping.
I was just wanting to ask about the floodlighting. I know you didn't specifically talk about that, but Mark did. Am I right in thinking that the paddle tennis courts will have floodlighting, but the all-weather pitch won't?
That's right.
I know that was in the original application, but surely what that means is that, particularly in the winter, at about 4 o'clock, you wouldn't be able to use it beyond that period. So I'm sort of thinking, is this going to lead to another application in the future to put the lights back in?
Well, of course, in terms of our scheduling of our day, if you think about our rugby and our football pitches, where we have to use those in daylight or sometimes into twilight hours. So in terms of the scheduling of when hockey will happen for us, those things are already restrictions that we have on us. So it obviously would have been ideal to have the floodlights, but our planning for our sport has to operate around those times where
you can organise it so that you won't have to have
exactly, and that's what we have to do.
Okay. And the public access, how many sort of hours a week or a month are you proposing?
So we've already, just in the analysis we've done, even when the school's in operation, we think it's around about 4 hours a day. But one of the things is, of course, when we're all on games, when we're not all on games, we're all in lessons, and therefore there can be public use during those times, and then that's not adding in the holiday time and things like that as well, and also substantial time on a Sunday.
And you have a team that sort of does the bookings for you, because I mean that's.
So we already have a facility in place for our sports centre. Because we have lots of public bookings for our sports centre, we have a facility in place to allow for online.
So you're quite used to the public coming in.
Yeah. And from a safeguarding point of view, we're well set up for that.
Thank you.
Could you just confirm for me the playing surface of the paddle tennis courts?
I'm afraid I can't. I can ask one of my colleagues to provide the detail.
Is it grass or is it artificial?
It's artificial. Artificial. Sorry, I thought you were asking for a more detailed.
No,
sorry.
no.
I was going beyond my ken.
No, it's not. No, we don't want to know the spec. Committee, any further questions? No. So thank you very much, Mr. Hall. Thank you. Right. The two local members are Councillor Norman and Councillor Rob. Councillor Rob just spoken. Councillor Norman said he doesn't want to speak as ward councillor. Do you wish to speak as ward councillor or leave it to the committee?
Chair, all I wanted to say was that we were contacted by members of Woodcote Parish Council yesterday and today, who let us know that they registered to speak this evening, but that they missed the deadline, unfortunately, so we're not allowed to come and speak this evening. But they assured us that Mark would be conveying some of their concerns verbally. Are you happy to do that, Mark, or Chair? Are you happy for Mark to do that?
I need to go back to Mark for questions rather than.
Shall I do that as ward member then? Would that be the best approach, or shall Mark do it
Well, you can speak as ward member, that's what I'm saying you can do, or you can just leave it to committee.
I might leave it to committee and Mark can provide the
Yeah,
information.
okay, we'll go back to
Mark
Mark for any
Thank
questions of the officer, which is now your time to ask him a question.
Thanks, Chair. Mark, the parish council had some concerns that they wanted raised, but they missed the deadline for this meeting. Would you mind kindly sharing that
Yes.
with the community? Thank you.
I'm going to get an email up, which means I'm going to have to stop sharing the screen. Apologies.
Do you
there.
want me to give you this so you can read off this?
No, it's fine. I'll find it on here. Did read it, but I don't want to miss anything out. Woodcuts would like to elaborate on the aspect of major development and the implications of the scheme, whether or not it's a major development in the children's national landscape and the implications of that. I think there's some confusion because the application is categorized in the sense that it's over a certain, the red line is over a certain area, therefore it is a major development in categorization terms. But the implications on the MPPF, which basically says that major development in the national landscape will only be allowed in exceptional circumstances, XYZ. I've said that in my report. I've addressed that in my report. I want to see what paragraph it is. Sorry. 7.7, where I go into detail about what is a major development, and in respect of the NPPF, and they don't actually determine or define what a major development is in context of that paragraph. It is down for the decision maker, taking into account, you know, the nature, scale, and setting, whether or not it will have a significant impact, whether or not it is therefore major in that sense. We would not argue it's major. A major development in the A1B, for example, would be sort of Cabby towards Wallingford. I don't know if you're aware of that. That was a large scheme. Something along those lines, something here proposed, some pitches and some courts are, you know, they're quite modest in scale, you know, relative to the site. They kind of relate well to the site. It's not really something that we regard as a major development. And I hope that committee tonight, you know, agree with those points. That was one of them main sort of points that they raised. Without reading it word for word, I'm afraid I can't. Lighting on the paddle tennis courts. They were led to believe that all the lighting of the scheme had been removed. However, the lighting on the paddle courts was retained. It was just the lighting for the all-weather pitch that has been removed. We have assessed that, but our own landscape officer, she's fully aware that the lighting was still proposed on the paddle courts. She's happy with the mitigation, the planting, the location of it in relation to the sort of residential roads nearby, and how it'll be read. And she's of the opinion that it wouldn't be harmful. And they provided an appeal example from, I want to say, 5 years ago or something, for something similar in Cranford House in Moulsford, where 12-meter high lighting was refused and dismissed at appeal in the village of Moulsford on an existing astro pitch, but without going through circumstances and context, we can't draw direct comparisons with this site, although what's currently proposed is only 5-meter tall lighting strips rather than 12-meter. So yes, our landscape officer is actually aware of that appeal, because I made her aware of that when the application came in, and it's based on, you know, different context really, and she's satisfied with the assessment and doesn't think it would adversely impact the landscape in that context. But yes, that's the abridged version of what they've said. I do apologise if they feel like I haven't fully addressed it, but you've read it yourself, and do you think that's fully?
I think that's representative. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
Just one question. When we were here on the 19th of January, we were hearing an application by Wallingford Rugby Club for a pitch, and which had full floodlighting. And I was very impressed by what we were shown in terms of the effect of the lighting in terms of the spread
Mm.
and and how it could impact on bats and wildlife and what have you. Has anything similar been done here? Because I thought that showed very effectively that the lighting would not adversely affect wildlife. and
Yeah, I don't,
ecology.
without looking at all the documents again, the impact of the lighting on the paddle court isn't something that we found contentious to probe and ask further details on that. There
Is
were
that
a lot
because it's
more.
lower? You
Yes.
said it was only 5
The
metres.
context of where it is on the site in relation
Yeah.
to the village as well, and the lower lighting is
Yeah.
it makes it more favourable. Whereas for the all-weather pitch, they were going to be 15-metre tall.
Yes, which is similar to the height on the rugby pitch.
Yeah, and there was work in, we lots of back and forth with regards to that aspect with us and our landscape officer and the agent trying to go back and forth landscape visual aspects and lighting studies and stuff. But ultimately, we've asked them to remove that, and they've removed that from the scheme. So
Yeah, I think the major difference there is that this particular application is it within the ARB, the National Landscape. The other one wasn't, and so it's dealt with differently.
Yeah.
I agree with you. The illustrations we had were
Really good. Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Councillor Norman.
Just with regard to the timing, the period over which the lighting can be, or the paddle courts can be used, I think that was given as up till 9:15 at night.
yes,
Is
and that
that-
was through discussions that the school had with, I believe, residents and locals, and then that's sort of outlined within several discourses that we.
So my question is, does that become a planning restriction, and are they then limited to that? And if they ever wanted to change it, it would require another planning application
Yeah, so the condition would restrict the use of the paddle courts to that time.
and the lighting therefore.
Yes, and the lighting therefore
So Chair, just to be clear, that would be a 17th condition. that
Added.
was just,
It's additional commission to what
That's
you,
right.
Yeah.
sorry, additional condition to what we've got in our paper. The lighting,
It's an additional.
additional condition to what we have in our papers.
in my update,
yeah,
my
yeah.
speech this
So we
time.
get to the condition 17.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll limit the timing. You haven't got it in.
So
you
that
haven't got it in front of you.
condition is in the application.
Yes, it will form part of the recommendation tonight for you to consider.
Thank you.
Right, any further questions? No? Right, I'll want a proposal then. Councillor Norman,
I propose that we accept the officer's recommendation and approve the application.
thank you. Is that seconded? Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Do you wish to speak now? Just no, well, let Councillor Norman make his speech first.
Yeah.
Yeah, proposal, yeah.
I think the application is well made. The school has a strong need for this in order to retain especially girls. The application was originally it's been held back for a long time because of the objections based on the lighting. That really was the only officer objection, I think, within this application. That's now been withdrawn, and I don't think there are any overriding objections that are still current on this application. And therefore, I recommend it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Norman. Councillor MacDonald, do you wish to?
Just say, I think the application takes account the anxiety of the local community, and adds more in terms of what it offers the school, the local community, and biodiversity too, the additional trees, the hedging and so on. So I think it's focusing.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so it's open for debate. Is there any debate? See no debate. I'll go straight to. I'll go back to Councillor Norman to sum up. Nothing to say.
Nothing further to add.
But we'll go for the vote. All those in favour of thank you. That is unanimous. So thank you very much. Yeah, I'll just give a moment to depart. Thank you for your presentation as well. That was very useful. Right, we'll go to Sydenham. 18 Holly's Close, which is P24 S3028 Fold, and the planning officer, of course, is Mark Bullen.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Chair. This application seeks retrospective planning permission for extensions to the existing property and subdivision of the site into 2 dwellings with associated parking and garden areas. This application is referred to Planning Committee this evening as the views of Sydenham Parish Council conflict with your officer's recommendation. The site lies within the built-up limits of Sydenham Village within Holliers Close. Principal matters of concern raised by the parish and neighbours relate to the impact that the proposed development has on the design and character of the area, whether sufficient parking is available to serve the development, and the impact on neighbours. The application site has been subject to a number of applications in recent years. Just going to bring up some slides to show you these. Planning permission has previously been granted on the site to redevelop the site to provide 2 semi-detached 1-bedroom homes, as evidenced on the slide in there. That's right. An additional planning permission has been granted for first floor accommodation to the original building, and that is there. What is now before us is an application that has sought to sort of amalgamate these 2 permissions in order to provide 2 semi-detached properties with accommodation in the roof. It is your officer's view that what has been implemented are 2 dwellings which are capable of being used as 2-bedroom dwellings rather than 1-bedroom dwellings. This is due to the form of permissions showing the ability of the ground floor to easily accommodate a bedroom. This has been assumed as a worst-case scenario in my assessment of this application. The ground floor footprint of the dwellings is very different to the development previously approved, which is actually, I think, demonstrated in the report before you. The garden sizes and provision of parking are considered acceptable in accordance with the council and Oxfordshire County Council standards, even for a 2-bedroom dwelling. Accordingly, your officers are unable to demonstrate that the development would amount to an overdevelopment of the site. Provision of first floor accommodation and the impact on neighbours as a result is considered acceptable, having regard to the previously approved permission on site and having regard to the fact that the original property could have installed dormer windows or roof lights to the rear without the need to apply for planning permission. Officers appreciate the concerns raised with respect to the design and scale of the development, but a vast majority of this has previously been considered acceptable in some way by previous applications. Officers recognise that this development is separate to the previous application before it, but the previous positions are material in considering the impacts of the development and have to be considered. In respect of all other material considerations, these have been addressed in the report before you. It is officers' opinion that the application should be granted permission subject to the conditions outlined within the appendix of the report. And similarly as before, whilst not identified in the report before you, officers are satisfied that the proposed development is in accordance with the emerging local plan, whilst albeit the policies in that are only attributed limited weight at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I have 2 speakers in, Mike May from the Parish Council and David Bernalies. Yeah. So, Mike May, could you take your seat, please? And you have 5 minutes from when you start speaking.
Sorry, I will reshare these photos.
I'll wait till you get to the right place.
I get to your bit there again. Is that right?
Right. Good evening. First aspect of this is in regard to amenity from the parish council's perspective. As the officer just stated, the amenity space is, in their opinion, is sufficient and just above the minimum of 50 square metres for this type of property. But that may be the case for an estate in Didcot, but totally out of character with rural communities and out of scale with all other properties in Holliers Close. And you can see from the picture on the right, they all have fairly large gardens, whereas this now provides a very small garden at the back in particular, which is the amenity space. The other aspect is when you look at the picture below, it's totally out of character with all the other properties. And indeed, the front of the building looks really what you normally expect to see at the back of a building. So it doesn't look anything like the estate, which is generally single-story bungalows. So the one in the middle is the new one. And as you can see, it's already been built.
Parking is also a major issue, and given the location of the property on the bend, actually overflow parking is again a major issue into Holliers Close. Now the next slide, please. Now on term of overdevelopment, the original property floor area was 64 square metres. The new property floor area is 187. The planning officer seems to rely on two aspects in regards to 817 to justify the subdivision, but I'd say that's somewhat questionable given that that really relates to the subdivision of larger properties, not the expansion of a small property. However, if it's still deemed to be relevant, it does say in 817, provided development is of appropriate term in size. Also in relation to H20, the extension or the alteration of building does not result in the disproportionate additions over and above the size of the original building. How can an extension 3 times the size of the original building be appropriate and proportionate? It's totally overbearing compared with any of the other surrounding properties. Be by far the biggest property and will have the bare minimum of amenity space. It will be totally out of context with all the other properties. And looking at the back, you can see 18 is on the left compared with the right. It is a completely different scale to anything else. Next slide, please. The officer states in 7.5 of his report that the current scheme amalgamates previous permissions to enable the subdivision of the site to 2 dwellings. I'm afraid that's not actually correct, and it's misleading because both the previous applications in 21 and 22 enabled the subdivision of the site and to provide 2 dwellings. So it's got nothing to do with amalgamating them and enables them to be separated. And the officer, as he'd mentioned in his report, is quoting the fact that these previous applications, because they've been approved, means that when you put it together, they should be approved as well, because individually they've been approved, but that's illogical. Because that actually implies if you keep on adding little applications, because they've each individually been approved, then you can just lump them all together and it's fine because they've been approved individually. We've also been advised to ignore previous applications in relation to consider this in its own right. And then it appears that the justification for approving it is based on previous applications. So in conclusion, if we can go to the last slide, SODC enforcement advised us that we advised them back in April last year. There was a significant breach. They didn't visit for 2 months. They agreed there's a significant breach, but did nothing about it. So they've done nothing to stop the development being completed. And indeed, they just said, well, the stop notice wasn't really expedient given the state of the works, which we just totally disagree with, that if the enforcement is to mean anything, it needs to be a disincentive. The planning officer's report, in our opinion, is not particularly objective, as it seems to be looking at any way it can to recommend the approval, perhaps because the consequences of refusal are too difficult. In our view, you must ignore that this has been built and treat it as if it's a totally new application, as we were guided to originally when this retrospective application came in. Because if you don't, our opinion is you get it to any applicant in the future is go get a planning permission for anything, build what you want. Planning is going to find it very difficult or not be prepared to reject it. Enforcement are not going to do anything. And actually, to a large extent, that starts to make you as a planning committee irrelevant because you approve one thing, people put the application in for other things, comes back and they're saying, well, it should be approved. That we think is not the right use of the planning process. Complete.
Right, questions? I've got one. You said on your previous slide that you've been advised that that was not the case. Can I ask who was the advisor?
But advised what was not the case.
The bottom line.
It was actually, I think, if I remember rightly, I'm not 100% certain, but I'd have to check. I think it was when we got the notification, I don't know whether it was from enforcement or not, saying that it was going to be, they said they'd asked for a retrospective planning application, and then we were told that actually it should be treated in its own right, as opposed to being.
That's my question to you. Who advised you on that?
It came from the council, but I can't remember. I can't quote
Okay.
chapter and verse of exactly who.
It's okay.
Was it- I
Any other
think it was
questions, councillor Topping?
Yeah, just running back the history on this. When was the building that we're now looking at, because clearly it's there, when was it completed?
I'm not 100% certain. I guess would it be about October,
Right. so very,
September,
very
October?
recent. And do you think the applicant, is the applicant here?
I know, I presume the gentleman over there is
Yes.
representing the applicant. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I mean, did the applicant believe?
Chair.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Can't
there's
ask
questions for the.
Take it off
Did
me,
the
I think.
applicant believe that, in your view, that what he was doing was within the planning permissions that had already been given, or within the general development order? What was going through
I
that?
don't think that's something I can answer.
No.
No. I think you need
I think
to,
it's difficult for them normally to, there seems to be a presumption that you can, if you've got two separate applications, it's fine just to put them together. I would suggest any planning advisor or any person applying for planning permission would know that those basic rules are, you can't have two separate applications, just put them together and it's fine. That's just standard planning, in my mind, standard planning law or protocols.
we will discuss that later, I am sure. Yeah, okay. So thank you very much, Mr. May. Thank you. The second speaker is David Burnwell's. Yeah, there's not pressures about how his name's pronounced.
It's a French one, so it's a bit difficult. I apologise.
Right, you have 5 minutes when you start.
Again, thank you, Chairman, and the members of the committee for allowing me to talk. I just must say one thing that I have just heard from the parish council delegate, that the enforcement procedure of the council is very good, and it's never a case of build what you want. That is totally wrong. Myself as a local government officer for 18 years, when I hear people say that, I just my hairs come up, because that has never been the case and never should be the case. And if people are watching, please do not, if the enforcement says stop, do stop, because it's very important. You must always get permissions in place before you do any work. Do not go out and do something on a limb, and don't assume you can just build what you want, because that is not the case, and you will be have trouble if you decide to do that. So please don't do that. That's my advice to everybody, as a government officer and a planning agent for the last 45 years. This project has been ongoing for the past 10 years. It has been a long go, and it's really just to find the right project for the right site. And initially, the original project was not going to include the loft, but the works were so underway, the roof was so badly failed, and it just made sense to complete something that had already got permission. The extensions and conversion works are all in accordance with the approved plan. There is nothing in those plans, height, size, or anything that hasn't already been approved by this council in full. Every single one of those applications have been through the council, through the planning committees, through the planning procedure, and they have all been approved previously. There's nothing on there that has been built that's not in accordance. And as far as the property is concerned, this isn't the only two-storey building, because in fact the photographs which were shown obviously are showing very clever, because in fact the house next door to number 80 is in fact 2 stories, and that wasn't really clearly shown on the drawings, and that was actually a 2-storey building that was put in place many years ago, and there's never been any objections, and it's actually settled in quite well. Samantha and Hossam are genuine people, and I've known them now for the last 10 years, and there is nothing about those people, Samantha and Hossam, that they are generally really nice people, grounded, caring, thoughtful individuals. They both have jobs that serve to integrate them in the local community, from caring for the elderly to transporting school children in the holidaymakers everywhere. The conversion is supported locally, and it's going to provide affordable housing for 2 couples in their locality. The design has all been through the planning procedure. It has been through every sort of, we've jumped through every hoop to get all the applications in the right format without any problems at all. The parking arrangements have now all been resolved. We've added another couple of spaces that was advised by the local planning officer, and that's been accommodated on the site. Obviously, the more parking you provide, the less amenity space, but that is how it goes. When we're recommended to do something, we always do take it on board. The design of the second story, the dormer as we call it, a loft conversion for intents purposes, is no different to the other, exactly the same that's been done in Plough Corner around the corner. And there are multiple bungalows in the area that have loft extensions. As far as works are concerned, that you can, in fact, permitted development does allow you to do lots of work. And as you know, you can actually build an 8-metre extension on the back of a property, which would probably increase it by more than 50%. So the numbers don't always stack up. And it's easy just to make these swift remarks, off the cuff remarks, saying, well, you can't do this, you can't do that. But permitted development does allow you to do certain things. It does allow you to do a loft conversion. It allows you to extend your property by 50% to the left, to the right. You can even build a 2-story extension on the back of your property within certain requirements. So there is a lot of work that can extend your property beyond the 50% or 100%, or I've done it before 400% if it does work well. And like I said, all these permissions that have been done have always got the full backing of the
That's 30
business.
seconds.
And I would just like to say the original bungalow is a 70s bungalow. And I would just like to say again, this is supported by all the local residents, apart from, we do feel perhaps a couple of neighbours, but they also have windows that face the site. So sorry about that, but that was a bit rushed. Thank you.
Committee, I'm sure there are lots of questions. Councillor Norman.
I've got 2 questions. One is, could you tell us who you are?
I'm David Bowie, and I'm of the company CAD Monkeys, which do basically planning agent and architectural design work.
Thank you. You didn't introduce yourself.
I do apologise for that.
And the second question, which I will also be putting to the planning officer, is you've said twice that if everything that's been built was already covered by existing planning permissions, why is there an application in front of us at all?
We were advised to do so by the enforcement officer, who I believe was asked to do that for the.
Do you understand why specifically?
No, we don't. This is why we put a whole new application to cover everything.
Councillor Sattler, have a question?
Sorry,
Councillor Rob.
Thank you. I would hazard a guess, and I'll put this question to you.
Yes.
The reason why you might be here is because you have the applicant has planning permission for 2 separate developments, but the scheme that's been implemented is the amalgamation
Of the two schemes.
Yes, and so that does have implications insofar as you have permission to subdivide the bungalows
Yes.
and to create 2 single-story
Yes.
houses.
Mhm.
You, separate to that, have permission to put a 2nd story on top to create 1 large family home.
Yes.
What we've now got is a subdivision with 2-story homes. And I think that's the concern. I think people are concerned about the implications as regards parking, the implications as regards what would be expected in terms of amenity space. And I think they're also concerned, listening to Parish Council, about the fact that they don't feel that this necessarily is in keeping with the character and appearance of the street scene and of the estate there, which is predominantly bungalows set in spacious plots.
The next door house is a 2-story house.
Yes, but it's not a 2-story house that's been subdivided into 2.
No.
No.
So this looks like a single house, but it is actually 2 properties. But that was given planning permission.
Fine. Do you accept, though, that perhaps it might have been advisable to have gone for planning permission for what you've actually built?
Well, we're going through the planning process at the moment. What I'm suggesting is that what we've got permission for is no different to what was already given permission. So the number of houses hasn't changed.
So that's not been the view of the enforcement team, which has asked you to submit a fresh retrospective application. So that's what we're being asked to decide.
Yeah, but I'm also sorry to recap that the actual status of the properties hasn't changed. There are still 2 properties. We've got permission for 2 properties.
Yeah.
So the question is, have we changed what we got permission for? The answer is no. We have got permission for 2 properties.
Yes.
So I suppose the debate might well be, is what we're producing, what we've actually got on site, acceptable in its present form or not?
Okay.
So we would argue that the permissions for what we have all got permission.
Can I just ask one follow-up question?
Yes, I mean,
And that relates to the appearance
Yes.
of the building.
Yes.
And seeing the photographs,
Mhm.
which I hope Mark will be able to bring up.
Yeah, I was going to revisit them anyway because I forgot to. So that's the application site. That's the neighbouring
May I
property.
just say that this actual picture has obviously been taken in such a view. It looks like it's the same size as the one on the left, but in fact, the left is actually a lot higher. These photographs are disproportionate.
Right, the
Unfortunately.
question I was actually going to ask is, I mean, is that breeze block? Is that, that's brick? Okay.
Great.
And
That was
You
the
designed this-
project.
I mean, I guess
Hmm.
what I'm interested in understanding is what efforts have been made to make at least the street scene of that, the front of that property attractive and in keeping, because those small windows set into that brick
Yeah.
wall is not what I would consider, to my eye, pleasing design. And I don't know if, I mean, clearly these are subjective criteria, ideas, but is that the appearance that was approved?
The design, I don't think is a matter for a debate in as much as that these have already been approved. We
Has
were
that
following,
particular design?
we were following drawings that have been approved. So the design is all through the negotiation through planning, which has been through this committee or the planning process, and that's what they approved.
You'll have to ask me when it's my time.
I'll ask Mark for the notes. Thank you. Thanks.
all right. Are there any further questions, councillor Sadler?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. Firstly, I mean, you talk about the applicants and their good character.
Yes.
But that's fairly irrelevant, isn't it? Because they're not living in the property and they're not prepared, they're not going to live in the property.
They are local and they do live 2 doors away and they may well live in the property, yes. Sorry.
So they may well live in a
They
in
may
what
well
they
live in-
term as an affordable house in the
In a
same thing that they
property
live.
that is their original home. So that's
So
still
it's their
their
original home, and they're subdividing it into 2, and they're going to live in one because it's they've created you termed it as an affordable house in
It will
in a
be,
street
yes.
that's otherwise a retirement street. It's
Yes.
otherwise it's
That-
got 70s bungalows, which you obviously don't like. Um,
I would take, I sort of disagree with you.
okay,
do
sorry,
like it, yeah.
I'll take that back. But I mean, you
I
referred
think
to
this
70s
conversation is
bungalows. and it's-
being very, very personal, which is a bit upsetting actually. So
Okay.
perhaps if you can ask your questions in an unbiased way, that would be better for both of us.
So
And it's not very nice to talk about people who haven't got an opportunity to answer for
well,
themselves.
they
No,
could come to
I
committee.
can-
So perhaps if you don't make
not-
it personal.
It's about a planning application, which is about the bungalow, how it looks, how it appears. It's not about the ownership.
You're
or
making
the
it
people
very, very
occupied.
personal and
Yeah,
We should avoid that.
just feel that it's not the right position for
Well,
a
it
council
is,
to be
how
asking
you've
those
heard
questions.
that.
their good character.
And we've
No.
heard that.
It's very
Not-
upsetting
not
to hear you
us
say that, councillor, sadly. But you're actually attacking me on a position that you're asking who is going to live in it and the characters of the
It's-
people,
Sorry,
which
that's not
is
a planning issue.
not a planning issue. And I can understand where you're coming from. You have visited homes in the locality. Do you personally know of anybody apart from the adjacent neighbours who have made a real concern about it? Have you?
So another question.
Have you?
You don't ask me questions.
Well, it's a fair
Sorry,
question.
No, you don't ask me
isn't it?
questions.
No, the questions go one way, sorry.
Okay. then.
So the other question is, do you feel that one access off the cul-de-sac turning there is appropriate for 2 separate properties? So that's 4 cars that will be having access to that one single access point that existed before. Do you feel that that's appropriate?
I have done what the highway have asked me to do, and they have approved it. And this is their design. So if you have any questions about the parking, I can certainly relay that to the highway department for you.
How do you feel about affordable housing being put into an estate like this, which was originally built as a sort of
Yeah, councillor Sadler, we're going off out of the subject area. This
he's
is a
making
planning
all these-
application, not for affordable
You
housing.
made all these statements.
Making it very
So-
personal,
so-
which is
so-
a
so-
great shame
yeah,
because
yeah.
you're not
The
here to
biggest question
it's,
here, sorry. I'm
It's
gonna-
bound to be personal because you're making
it's
it
very
personal.
personal. You
Sorry.
shouldn't be
Making it
asking me
personal.
about
Can we,
people that
can we
aren't here.
stop, please?
That's not what you're doing.
No.
Your job is to.
Can I ask you a question?
Sorry.
It's only a question.
Okay.
The planning application that was approved in 2021 was for 2 1-bedroom dwellings.
Yes,
What is built there now?
2 1-bedroom dwellings.
Are they capable of being 2-bedroom dwellings?
The original has the same number of rooms as the approved. There were 5 rooms and there's 5 rooms. There's no difference. The original one had a dining room. This one hasn't got a dining room. So the number of rooms hasn't changed.
Okay.
So if you ask a question about could this one be, any property could be, and it was no difference, councillor.
Councillor Topping.
Has the square footage changed at all?
No,
So it's the same square
it's
footage.
apart from the loft conversion, it is
and
exactly the same.
height?
Exactly the same as the approved plan, yes.
Right.
Exactly the same. Nothing's changed. The request for parking was done by Highways and we've implemented that on the drawings for approval.
Right, I think I want to call it.
Just
One
one
more
last
question.
question. One last question. You
Yes, sir.
referred to the fact that there were a couple of people who objected and that the neighbours.
I think it's only maybe one. I don't think it was actually 2 people.
Okay. And you also said there was considerable support.
Yes,
Were there, how many letters were there?
I haven't got the exact number, but from the email I received from the client, he mentioned about 8 neighbours that were contacted and not one replied, or just one replied with an objection.
So they didn't support, they just
No,
didn't.
we've had a few letters of support verbally and otherwise, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we have had letters of support.
And are those up on the planner's website? Are there any supporting?
You're gonna have to go to the officer for that. We'll
Yeah.
come back to that later.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for.
Yeah, I'm sorry it's a bit heated, and I do apologise if I came about unruly, but I just get sometimes agitated when it's not fair for the other people to be respond. It's just only fair that they all have an opportunity if their questions raised about them. But thank you
All right.
again, thank you everyone.
Okay. Ward members. Councillor Suffolk. You wish to speak as
Yes, I'll
speak as a ward member or as a member of the
I'll
committee.
speak. So, say that again.
You can speak as a ward member or as a member of the committee.
Well, I'll speak as a ward member. That doesn't preclude me from voting, though, does it?
No.
So
If you feel you may be predetermined as a ward councillor, then it
No, it's not.
would mean that
No,
no, I'm not. So the application in question has had a total of 6 applications since 2015. The applications include a combination of front, side, and rear extensions, and the penultimate being a first floor to the detached house option. So the one in 2022 was the first floor extension, but that was to the detached house. The concern is that the mix of these applications has come out to lead to a build of 187 square metres, with a mere 64 square metres per property. The arrangement of the accommodation suggests 2 1-bedroom properties, which was approved in 2021, and then the bigger one in 2022, and then the combination of those 2, as described in 7.5 of the report, which is the amalgamation of the 2 applications. Also, just the 2016 application, which proposed a separate detached dwelling in front of in the front garden, was also refused, and it was refused because it was too cramped. That was the reason given, that it was too cramped. And I would argue that what's left of this plot is also too cramped. You have a very much larger house, and I don't like the comparisons with the one next door. I think if it was the same as the one next door, then it would be detached. It wouldn't be 2 separate dwellings. I think having 2 separate dwellings, so-called affordable housing in this location is not at all appropriate. You have to have a car if you live in Sydenham. There is no choice. There is a bus service at the end of the village, but I wouldn't like to say what its frequency is. So your only option is to have a car. So if you have a couple living there, which is quite likely, that could very well be 2 cars, and with the additional space, making room for an extra bedroom, and I know it doesn't say that on plans, then you could have a young family moving in, and then that changes the dynamic altogether. So I would say that it's not appropriate for the area, and I understand it has upset an awful lot of people in the area. I don't believe there's been loads of letters of support for it. But obviously I can't prove otherwise.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sadler. Right, it's now, well, the committee can ask you questions now. The committee has any questions to ask of Councillor Sadler?
Oh,
Yes.
Ed?
Yeah.
No, no, sorry. No.
Right, we will now go to the planning officer. I believe Councillor Roll might have a question.
I have a question for you, Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Please could you talk us through a couple of aspects of this? Firstly, the design and appearance of this property, which I have to confess, if this were to come to committee just as it is, I would say that is ugly and it hasn't been considered properly. Could you talk us through the extant permissions as they stand, please?
Okay. I mean, the extant permission, I say extant permission, yeah, this is what was granted. This was to subdivide. So as you can see from the front, windows to the front on the gable, and some windows in the receiving aspect here. What we got is very similar to that, windows to the front. During the sort of questioning of the agent, you raised your displeasure of this, but it's largely similar, if not exactly the same as what has been granted. I would just be cautious about calling it ugly. People have designed and spent time looking at this and creating it. It's not really nice to call things ugly. If it was your profession and someone was saying it, I don't think it's very nice. Yes, I think looking at the front of it, very similar to, if not same as what we've got on site. So yeah, I'm hoping that answers your question. I said there's another one.
Well, all I would say is that I think it is different.
Okay.
Because I think that windows are smaller in the
Right.
in the scheme as it has been built, which does affect the appearance.
Okay.
Whether it affects the appearance adequately to justify refusal is another matter. Whether the harm is sufficient, but I wouldn't agree with the idea that we can't criticise things as ugly. I don't think that that is a building that is in keeping, but whether it is sufficiently out of keeping is another matter. And I just wanted, again, just for our own clarification, could you talk us through the number of rooms? Highways obviously has not raised an objection, but that was a question certainly that Councillor Sadler asked, and I'm keen to understand what the impact of having two separate properties with the addition of the dormer accommodation, what's the impact of that in terms of potential rooms? How can we treat that in our decision making?
So looking at the history of the site, it was clear that the previous permission had all the accommodation on one floor, a bedroom to the front of each property. If you compare that then to what's currently now proposed, the sort of bedroom aspect has now been replaced as a lounge where the bedroom goes upstairs. It is a reasonable judgment to assume that the previous scheme coupled with this scheme would make you think that there could well be two bedrooms provided on within each property. Whilst that's not shown on the plans, it is something that we need to pay due consideration to. So whilst the plans do show that each property now proposed are one bedroom properties, we have, like I mentioned in my opening speech, have assessed it on the implication of it potentially being two, which would be the worst case scenario in terms of measurements, etc., that we want to assess. So the maximum amount of living space that we can put in there. So as an implication, the garden sizes requirement in our design guide goes up slightly. I've considered that on the basis of it being two bedrooms, and they are sufficient. We would also require 2 parking spaces per house rather than 1, which we have demonstrated can be provided on the plan. So I went back to them to explain, I went back to the agent to explain that we would be assessing this in the worst case scenario of a 2-bedroom house. We need X, Y, and Z provided, including parking. And they came back with a plan. Highways looked at that plan, and Highways are fine with it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great, thanks very much.
All right, if Highways don't object, there's not a lot we can do. Is there really? Councillor Norman.
Can I just repeat the question I asked to the agent? which is, can you explain precisely why this application is here if everything that has been built had been covered by previous applications?
Yeah, so this is what was granted consent on the screen. So as you'll notice from the rear, there are no first floor additional aspects. Whilst this application, separate, did allow some first floor addition, it can't be assumed that one can be added to the other under just because two different permissions. It needs to be one form of development together, which is not what's happened. So hence why they need planning permission to get all that development in one go rather than that and
So
that.
those two permissions that were both granted
Yes.
cannot be regarded as additive one to the other.
No,
They were
because
alternative.
this is an application to convert into two.
Yes.
This is an application just to have one house have first floor accommodation. So you can't just assume that one house can have that first floor accommodation. They could implement that and then come in with an application to extend and subdivide, but that's not what they've done. What they've done is not straightforward. It's not a straight line. They've gone up and down, but so our enforcement team looked into that and advised that the best course of action would be to apply for a retrospective planning permission.
I understand. Thank you.
Chair, very, very quickly, Mark, could they have added the dormers? So could the applicant have done the subdivision and then added the dormers and the second story accommodation under PD?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I would have
Yeah.
to check the original that permission, the decision notice, because sometimes if we feel like the plots are small, we might remove PD rights, but it is entirely possible that they could have added dormer windows, roof lights, etc.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions? I've got one question, but it's not to Mark, actually, it's to our clerk here. Because I'm just concerned that if
Our senior planning officer.
Senior planning officer.
sorry, the planning officer, sorry.
I know what you meant.
I feel embarrassed now. If this was to be refused, what would be the likely course of action following it?
So if in the event that members are minded to refuse the application and that a motion was carried for refusal, the first thing we would do is look at the reasons for refusal. The applicant, of course, would enjoy a right of appeal, and I think it is highly likely in this case that they would exercise that right. During that process, we as a council would be unlikely to exercise any kind of formal action. We would await the outcome of the inspector's decision, and then in the event of that being allowed, that would regularise the situation. If the appeal was dismissed, we would look at the reasons why the inspector turned the application down, and that may inform our decision to take action at that point. But it would be a sort of a staged process.
Staged process,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, and your opinion of the how would the appeal go?
Always caveat that with it being my opinion, because we never know how an appeal process will go.
No, we'll discuss some more shortly. So.
But what I would say is a planning inspector would be highly likely to concentrate on focusing on planning merits, would not be so interested in the planning process and how we've got to this point. So they would assess the development as it is and the application sort of before also would be an appeal on whether they feel there would be planning harm arising from what has been built. So it would be an assessment of whether the development as it stands has an adverse impact upon the neighbours, harmful impact upon the character and appearance of the area, and whether it meets the standards of the council's design guide and relevant policies. You won't be surprised to hear my view that I think it does meet those standards, and I think that the impact upon neighbours and the area is, I would describe it as that there is an impact, but in my opinion, it tips to being an acceptable impact. So it's a summary of my view.
Thank you very much. Okay, where are we at? Have we got any more questions for the planning officer? We haven't. Therefore, we need to go for a motion, please. Councillor Sadler.
I propose a motion to go against officer recommendations and refuse permission.
You motion to recuse. Is that seconded? Sorry, that is not seconded, so I can't move forward on that one. Looking for an alternative motion, councillor MacDonald,
I go with officer's recommendation
for approval.
for approval.
Okay, thank you. Which is that seconded? Thank you, councillor Rob. Do you wish to speak?
Yeah, very briefly, I appreciate the small windows. Problem means it's more energy efficient than the houses around it and more sustainable, but that's that aside. The other thing is there is enough community space. The officers have agreed that, so the officers have agreed there's an issue of parking. And the parish council obviously don't have a real problem with it because they said it was good enough for Didcot. Can I just say if it's good enough for Didcot, it's good enough for the whole area. Therefore, I have no issue at all with this particular property. That's funny.
Thank you, councillor MacDonald. Councillor Rob has seconded. Do you wish to speak?
I'll speak now, yeah. I have total sympathy with the parish council and with those in the community who are upset about this, because we see this a lot, unfortunately. And it is so deeply frustrating and angering when people go to the effort of getting planning permission, of going through great detail and effort to design things that are sensitive and in keeping. And then we have this scheme, which I think is a hodgepodge. And it is an amalgamation of two schemes. And now we have this retrospective application to regularise something that was not actually permitted in its entirety. That said, I think the planning officer has done a really good job of assessing this in detail. He's considered the worst case scenario, which is that it will be used as each of these two properties will be used as a 2-bed. And with that in mind, it meets, even in the worst case scenario, it meets our minimum requirements for amenity space. It meets the requirements of highways. I do believe, and I'm sorry, I don't believe a building can be offended. I think it is unattractive, but it is not materially different to what has been permitted. So I don't think we would have a leg to stand on at appeal. Is it something that I would hold up as a bastion of beautiful design? No, I don't think anyone could claim that. But it's not sufficiently harmful for us to refuse. And I think if we were to refuse this, we would be on a hiding to nothing in front of the planning inspectorate. So I would agree with officer recommendation.
Okay, thank you, councillor Rob. Does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Sadler?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't put things quite as eloquently as that, but just to say that obviously it is a shame that we're going to approve something like this. It's sending a message to people that it's okay to be in contempt of the planning process and just go ahead and build what you like, because it might just be a little bit too complicated for SODC to get around it if they're facing an appeal. And I'm very respectful of that, and I know that officers do an enormous amount of work trying to resolve these issues. And I just think it's a terrible shame that that works. You know, we've seen appeals before, and they've been passed, and quite often people who come in, sorry, not appeals, we've seen retrospectives before. People come in and, you know, make their case, and they look quite relaxed because I think they know that it's most likely to be approved. And I think it's a very dangerous precedent, that sort of thing. There's nothing now to stop all the other bungalows in Hollyoaks Close doing exactly the same thing. So what you're doing is changing the character of an area. I feel that where I bought my house, that I bought that street scene, and I know it's not absolutely cast in gold, and you can't do anything about, you know, someone putting an incineration plant next to you and stuff. But you know, to the best possible case, what you bought is what you should have, and it, you know, you should have that protected to a certain degree. Councillor MacDonald, your comment on Didcot, I think the trouble is what Councillor May was trying to say was that in an urban location inside of the middle of the town, then that sort of space would be more normal, and inside a village house in the sticks such as Sydenham, that is not normal. That is quite small for that sort of environment. I think that's what he's trying to say. He certainly wasn't making casting any aspersions on Didcot. in my view.
Okay, any further comments? I think I'll leave it at that. There's a lot that could be said, isn't there? But I think I'll leave it at that. Yeah, and we'll go for a vote. All those in favour of the motion for approval? It is 1, 2, that is 5. Those against? 1, so that is passed. Okay, so thank you very much, committee. We've got one more item to look at, which I normally miss.
We're still being recorded, we're still live.
So, Chair, just reporting on the appeals that have been received in January. If I'm right, I just want to draw attention to one that Councillor Rob asked me about at the last meeting, which is the one at Satwell House, which was submitted just in time and has been accepted, so is now running as a written representations appeal. So we will await that decision with.
Yes, I think we'll await that one with interest because the committee overturned the recommendation. I think the committee was justified in overturning that recommendation, but we'll wait the appeal decision.
Can I ask a question, which is simply a planning policy and the planning rules one on that? It's a very quick question. The applicant, the appellant, if that's the right name, has put in further material. What are the rules concerning putting in further material which is not in the original planning application?
The answer to that, Chair, if I might be,
Yeah,
it depends. So we will be asked for our views, and we will form a view as to whether we think how substantially different we feel it is from the submission that we saw. Ultimately, it is the inspectorate's decision whether or not they accept that plan. My experience is the planning inspectorate tend to be fairly generous in accepting amendments, but we will be able to express a view on that. So I can't be definitive, I'm afraid, but that's the process that we'll go through.
I think they generally approve it rather than
They
not approve it. So if you, a bit like the rules on planning, if you can check, if you amend an application to make it acceptable, then they will go that way. So I think the planning inspector will use the same rules. So, and I take your point that they shouldn't just do that, you know.
And this would mean that both parties can offer new opinions, at least,
Yes,
if not new material,
so
in principle.
yes,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, but that's quite an important decision that we made on that one. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we're finished.
Susie, can you let us know when we're not broadcasting anymore, please? Susie, can you hear me?
Susie, stop broadcasting.